Hi, folks, and welcome to the Gold Hoops and God podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Guerra, and I have a really, really super awesome guest today. I have Gabrielle Celeste. Hi, Gabrielle.
Hi, thank you so much for having me on. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, I'm super excited that you're here. So, Gabrielle is an intuitive astrologer and has a company called Agua Astrology, and she's celebrating her third 3-year anniversary, which is super exciting. Yay, we love that. And in addition, she also has a podcast with her sisters, which is called the Spiritual Sisters Podcast. Yay.
Yes.
Super exciting. Oh my gosh. So I'll dive into this a little bit more in a minute, but I was actually able to have a session with Gabrielle, and it was so amazing. When we get into kind of like the part of the episode today where we talk about like spirituality and religion, I'll share a little bit more, but it was super on point. So yes.
Aww, I love that. I'm so glad it was helpful. I was
It
just
was.
telling my sister Nicole, the one of my sisters that I co-host with, and I was like, I came off that reading just feeling like, oh my gosh, this is why I do this work. And it was such a nice reminder. And so it was just as special for me as it was for you, is what I'm trying to say.
Oh, thank you so much. I love it. That's super, super cool. So we'll kind of dive in. So one of the topics that I always like to touch upon in the podcast is in regards to culture, because we as Latinas, Latinas is such not only a complex term, but also an umbrella term, really. Like when we look at it, all of us have such unique experiences. Growing up in California is different than growing up on the East Coast as a Latina, being Mexican American versus being Cuban American, growing up in Argentina, all the rest, right? Like all the variations of what it means to be Latina, Latin American, et cetera. So I would love to hear from you as far as like how you kind of understand or envision your own culture.
Yeah, I love that question. Thank you for asking. It's interesting because as I've gotten older, I've placed even more importance on my culture. And it's so wild because right now I'm under shamanic apprenticeship and I'm working a lot on my lower 3 chakras, primarily my root chakra. And root chakra is so much of the tribal energy and like you as part of your family, but also a sovereign individual and you apart from that. And something that I appreciate about our culture so much is that it's like we really do have each other's backs and it's like it's a point of strength, but it can also be kind of like a point of weakness sometimes too, because enmeshment can come in and codependency and all the things that maybe don't serve us over the course of time, especially as we lean into doing the spiritual work. But for me, I think that the culture is just it's one that's so special. It's like I don't know if it's really perceived with as much respect from the outside looking in. But when you're a part of it, it just kind of carries a different kind of weight because like, your family has your back, you have their back. And it's not maybe something that you see so much in like, I'm coming up with the Caucasian cultures coming to mind. And it's just like, it's just different. Like the values are just different.
Absolutely. I love that. It's so true. Like and I would say that for many of us, this concept of culture, this concept of family, it extends way beyond just our blood relatives. It's extended family. It's the neighbors that we grew up with that always were watching out for us, when our mom was working, that kind of thing. Like, I have cousins, aunts and uncles, people that I call cousins, aunts, uncles that are not blood related to me at all. We're not related, but that bond of family is there, like I would do anything to help them. I know they feel the same way about me. And so I think it's really special. And it's true. Like I love what you mentioned in terms of that root, right? The root, it is a blessing. We do receive so much from our family lineage, from our ancestors, strength, among other things. But it also, like you said, and I think it's so important to highlight or to make mention of, sometimes those ties can hold us back.
Yeah.
It's painful, it's uncomfortable, it's perhaps even a little taboo to mention. But sometimes I think that especially women don't really pursue their dreams, or they hold themselves back to a degree because of family.
Yeah, I
Let's
agree.
say like an entire family is in Miami, everyone's in Miami, et cetera. I don't know why that city's coming up, but but someone has a dream of like, man, I really want to live abroad. I want to live in Paris one day. And that's like their heart's desire. They want to go, study, et cetera. And sometimes a person will just not go because they're scared to leave their family. They feel like their family can't cope, et cetera. And that desire never gets fulfilled.
Yeah,
And that's
that's
really
so
hard. It's
beautiful.
those dreams, like it's super important. And I don't know, I feel like that also can build resentment. I mean, of course, like that can build a lot of resentment, and where and I think also it has to do with generations, right? I think now perhaps our generation has more freedom, but in previous generations, I think in my grandmother, my great grandmother, the options were limited, like the options were very limited. So
Yeah, I think that's something that was coming to mind, is that like that healing within the generations can look so different than it did for your ancestors, or even
mhm,
like, a fellow Latina as well. And I think something that is coming to mind is, there was a lot of like, especially as I'm really deep into my healing, especially with the
mhm,
lower three chakras, coming back to that, I felt a little bit of like resentment at times and frustration with like, oh my gosh, I'm doing this energy work, the spiritual work, and it's challenging. It's not
yeah,
easy,
it's not easy.
but it's not easy.
Mhm,
But then I think about it, it's like, well, Gab, like your parents were first generation immigrants. They were very poor. They
mhm,
were working on survival. Like, so you get to do this work because of the
right.
sacrifices and commitment that they made. Whereas, like,
Mhm,
there's other, I've had friends and whatnot, and this is their path. This, it totally works for them, but
mhm,
something that for me, I knew that wasn't going to work, because I think I'm meant to have some impact, more
mhm,
impact,
mhm,
and maybe like a wide range when it comes to that impact. Is
mhm,
they're very much like, they lived in their parents' home, and then they got married, and they went straight to the home that they share with their husband and now kids. And I'm just like, I it kind of like that, that ancestral, that tribal programming, it translates in a lot of different ways. It can look in
mhm,
a lot of different ways.
mhm.
And people don't realize it, but there's so many layers of healing that comes with it. And
Yeah,
so yeah, I do think that there's channel challenges for sure.
definitely. Yeah, there's definitely layers. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I remember distinctly like that my parents couldn't understand why I wanted to live in the dorms.
Mhm.
Loyola Marymount was only half an hour from my parents' house, so totally commutable, right? Like I
Totally.
could have theoretically lived at home, gone to class, and great, But I was like, no, I need this experience. And of
Yeah.
course, going going through that experience now, looking back, I'm like, yeah, I did. Like I had to be with other students, I had to have fun, I had to learn, I had to like study with them, like the whole package of like being an undergrad, right? And living on campus. Um, it cost a pretty penny. You have loans galore. But anyway,
Mhm.
those are like the negotiations we make. But for them, it was a very foreign concept as far as like, you have a
Mhm.
perfectly good room here. Like, why are you going to
Mhm.
go spend, right? Why, and on
Yeah.
top of it, why are you going to go have a roommate? That's weird, right? Like,
It's so funny. I'm just thinking, and I don't think this is an overshare, but my mom, she definitely had like that experience where her parents, they were all immigrants, and she went to university. She went to Cal, San Diego, or Cal, San Luis Obispo. There's their
mm,
state school, and that was 12 hours away from where she lived. She was actually down in the El Centro area.
oh, yeah.
And so we're just like, we're very Hispanic in that way, I guess.
Hmm,
And
hmm.
she had that separation. And for me, I didn't move out of my familial home, and I was a commuter. I went to school, and I
Oh,
had that whole like, oh,
oh,
I'm living at
interesting.
home.
Hmm, hmm,
I didn't have the whole dorm experience,
hmm.
because again, there's that tribal programming that's coming up, and it looks differently for each
It does.
generation.
Yeah.
But I totally understand what you're speaking to, and how it's almost like uncomfortable for our relatives when they don't necessarily get it, but there's so
Sure.
much healing that comes as a result of like those choices that we make to come back to self-sovereignty and empowerment and healing, and doing that inner
Mhm.
work on the root chakra.
Totally. Yeah, and the beautiful thing is that it all works out. You know what
It
I mean?
does.
Like
It
it's
does.
gonna be okay, right? It's gonna be okay. Time will tell. We all figure it out. The pieces fall into place, and it can be a very healing process for everybody, right? For the family, for the person doing these kind of like, doing this kind of work. I love it. Cool.
Mhm.
So let's see. We kind of sort of have sprinkled it in, but I would love to talk to you about your spiritual path and spiritual journey. I know that's like,
Yeah.
I know it's like a big topic. That's
Mhm.
when, so it's funny when people ask me about like theology or like, what do you think about like religion? I'm like, yo, do you have like 5 hours? You know, because it's deep, you know, it's complex and deep. But I love that you have a more spiritually based business.
Mhm.
And I'm super curious as far as like the, let's see, maybe like the milestones that kind of
Yeah,
led you to it. I think that would be super
totally.
amazing for people to hear about.
Yeah, so I'll try to make it quick or summary and hit all the main points. But so I'm Latina and I was raised Catholic and
Mhm,
I had the privilege of going to private religious institutions throughout my entire life.
mhm,
And a lot of my perception of the divine came forth by way of the Catholic
mhm,
perception. So
mhm,
I'm Catholic. I'm previously Catholic. I'm definitely identify now as more spiritual because there's just a more of a broadness to it. But
mhm,
I mean, if I wanted to get married in the church, I could because I've done my sacraments to do so.
mhm.
So
Yes.
I was definitely ingrained with all of that, and looking in even spirituality or like talking to psychics and doing the tarot cards, like it was considered taboo. But
Mhm,
I didn't know until my Saturn return, which is and I always felt that of myself that I was
mhm,
intuitive and gifted. I just didn't have the language for it.
mhm,
And when
mhm,
that season
mhm.
of life came forth, I was like, oh, yeah, you can't run from it and you can't deny it. And
You can run,
yeah,
but you can't hide. Like,
yeah, exactly. And come to find out, my parents are very psychic themselves. Like the astrologers were actually from my mom's side of the family, and my dad,
mm,
just long line of intuitives, himself included. And I was working so out of college, during college and out of college, I during my undergrad, I was working for the IRS, the
mm.
government. And so
Really?
yeah, and then I transitioned into working for a private 500, a Fortune 500 company that I can't legally say the name because I signed an NDA, but I can speak to
Mhm,
it. And they came to be involved with the United States government, and they were involved with $1 billion investigation for fraudulent devices that they put into their vehicles. And we
wow.
went through a string of 4 years of audits, one of them being the final ones being an internal audit. And in that internal audit, honestly, it was sparked out of just a lot of envy and
Mm,
envy of like the department that I had created over my time during my time with the business.
mm.
And they made me be the fall guy for that multi-million dollar investigation. And in that
Oh
period
my
of time,
god.
I know it was wild. It was so traumatic to go through that in your late
Insane. Oh my
20s.
god.
Yeah, and I
That's
knew
crazy.
exactly what they were gonna say. I knew exactly what they were gonna do. It was like my prophetic visions
You
and my
saw it
intuition
coming
was
like,
yeah, it was coming, and it was honestly
wow,
divine orchestration for me to get out of there because I don't think I would have left otherwise.
otherwise. Mhm. Yep,
Yeah.
yep, yep,
So
yep.
it was that where I was just
Little
like
tower moments, yep.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I was like, "I surrender," right? Like, I will
Yeah,
do what I'm supposed
yeah,
to.
let's go, let's get through this,
Yeah,
wow,
and I
that's
didn't
intense.
and, like, girl, I didn't even know, like, what I was getting myself into because I think if I would
That's
have
intense.
known, I
If
don't
I
know that I
know
would
what
have done it.
right,
Yeah,
right,
I
right.
wouldn't have done it.
Oh my
So
gosh.
so I was just like, "Okay," and, like, by that point, I was so into
Wow.
this work and come to find out it was, a recollection, a remembering of my soul's purpose in this lifetime, and I got really
Mm,
into astrology, and I had 2 girlfriends, mom and a daughter,
mm,
and it was during 2020.
mm,
Even though I had always been into astrology prior to, because my dad
mhm,
would literally
mhm.
be like, anytime Walter Mercado came on the TV, like all we would do is like watch that, right? He was
Okay.
so stuck to it,
Yep,
right?
yep,
So,
yep.
and then when he passed, in the recent years, I was just like, oh my gosh, this is like an icon, like departing from this
Oh,
earthly
yeah.
plane. Totally. Yeah. It was in that period of time where I really got into astrology and she studied Vedic and she introduced me to
Mm,
her birth chart, my birth chart. Didn't even know my birth time at this point, right? And from that point, I was hooked, and I was just like, I come to find out, I have what's called Saturn in the 12th house, and when you have
mm,
Saturn in the 12th, there's a very strong likelihood that you're an astrologer from a previous lifetime or in a previous
wow.
lifetime. But the proficiency in like me picking up the language that is astrology, it just came on so hot, and so it was that point. At that point, I was like, okay, I'm going to do this professionally, and then later
Yeah.
on I recognized that I was like, "Oh, wait, I'm psychic." Like, there's an intuitive component that's coming
Right,
in,
right.
and the astrology is the foundation for it. And then from there, I left that job, started my business, and I then went to work. I swear my life sometimes is like, it's kind of wild when I share my work experiences. I just recently departed working on second generation COVID vaccines. So I went from like
Mm,
the government to a company
interesting.
founded by, yeah, like
Wow.
the Nazis. You can Google it. And
Oh my
then
gosh.
And then I'm now working. I previously worked on that up until a couple months ago, and now I'm a full-time psychic. So it's just really interesting. My background, for those curious, if anyone's wondering, I have a master's in business, but I think so much of all of my time with career, and that's very much like what's in my chart, was meant to be so that I could build the skill set to do this work full time.
Yes. Oh, I got chills. Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
That makes perfect sense. Yeah, I totally, I get that. You know what I mean? I think that these, like, I call them stops. You know what I mean? I feel like these stops on the journey is to gain skills, you know, it's to gain certain skills, and it may not make sense, right? In the moment, it's like, this is maybe it doesn't quite make sense. But then of course, right? Like hindsight is, what do they say? Hindsight is 2020. Like looking back, you're like, oh, I see. Right. You know, it's all part of the path. I love it.
Thank you.
So I have to shout out Walter Mercado. Icon, legend, like he really changed the game in so many ways. Actually, how my students, they do a film paper, and the Walter Mercado documentary, Mucho Mucho Amor, is on there as one of the options. And they always love it. Yes, I also grew up watching Walter Mercado on both sides of my family. Yeah, it's funny. Like I feel like there was always little signs that my family was like kind of psychic, kind of into curanderismo.
Oh my gosh,
but we just didn't talk about it, right? We just didn't like make a thing about it. We just did stuff like, oh, Linka with a huevo. Okay, that's fine. That's normal, right? Like that's cool. Anywho, but yes, Walter Mercado all the way. He really, I think his presence on the TV screen was very healing for a lot of people. I think especially for like queer folks, queer Latinos, to see someone be their authentic self and to kind of like, almost like a mirror, kind of like watch their families watch Walter, and it was cool, right? And it was acceptance, and it was excitement, and it was like, you know, this beautiful, I don't know, it was just such a beautiful thing. And then for any of us who were also, for example, into astrology or tarot or kind of psychic or intuitive, I was like, oh, okay, like I'm not crazy, you know, like it's like I'm not crazy. I'm not like making these things up. Like this is real, you know, like this is real, and it's okay. And it's okay, and it's okay if it takes time to kind of like hone those gifts. Anyway, but he was really incredible. All right. Oh yeah, and so I wanted to kind of like mention at the beginning. So Gabrielle and I did a session together, and you know, without sharing all this stuff, of course, because there's, you know, a personal element to it. There was one thing that I will share because it will become public. Was about a book.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh! If anyone knows me, shout out my academics. If anyone who knows me personally knows that the topic of the book has been kind of like buzzing in my world for a very, very, very long time.
Yeah.
And truly, like especially during COVID, during lockdown, when everything was kind of like on hold, and I was dealing with my own mental health stuff, I really considered whether or not I should just like drop the project, because why not, right? Like in other words, if I had already been under contract with somebody, then you follow, right? Like you got to complete the project, right? At that point, and at this point, actually, it's really just my desire to do it that's keeping me going. And what I realized is like, oh no, honey, this is like a destined thing. You got to write this thing. Like, yeah, it was crazy.
It's funny right now, before we started recording, and I'm not going to share it because obviously, like, we can talk about it after.
Yeah.
But I was getting a download for you with respect to the topic as to what the focus of the book would be, and I'm curious if you and I are on the same page.
Okay. Yeah. Oh my gosh, we'll for sure talk after the
yeah
after the recording. Yeah, and it's funny. I feel like that's part of how the spiritual life works, is you have to be open, right? You have to be open. You have to like be open to the signs and synchronicities, and to not, in other words, to not brush things off as coincidence. It's not a coincidence. You know, that's such a huge thing. It's like, that's how our ancestors, spirit guides, etc., the Holy Spirit, however you want to take it. That's how they're trying to get our attention. That's how they're trying to tell us. And every time we ignore that longing, every time we ignore those basically those instructions, it doesn't go well. You know what I mean? Like for a lot of different reasons. Like it's there for a reason. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah. I definitely think, and I think that because I was so far in the matrix, especially when I was working corporate before my Saturn return hit, it was so dismissive of that. Like, you see those angel numbers, you see that feather on the ground, you see that license plate that has that place that you're thinking about moving to.
Right.
Like, those are signs from the universe, spirit, God, consciousness, however you refer or label it.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I remember, this is kind of a funny example. I remember I was like shopping, I was looking for like sweaters or something, and there was like cities, right? And it was like Madrid. I was like, oh, cool. I lived in Madrid for a few years.
Love that.
And it was, and it had what did I say? Madrid, and then it said 2008. 2008 is the year that I graduated. I'm like, what? Like, what are, in other words, that's just kind of like a funny, silly, like, example. Like, what are the chances it would have, like, not only the location, but my graduation year? This was not graduation apparel. This was just like a store that had like sweatshirts, and some of them had cities on it, just, whatever, like Paris, London, whatever. But I was like, for me, that was a sign, right? For me, that like, it spoke to me in a particular way. But for another person, they'd be like, that's just a coincidence. That doesn't mean anything.
No, it's definitely, those are all signs. And it's like, they're there if you're paying attention to them and if you're open to receiving them. And that's the way that the divine communicates with you.
Absolutely.
And some people think that they're going crazy at first, or they could be making it up, but really that's not the case.
Yeah, exactly. And and I'll share this here. Why not? I think one of the things that I have struggled with is because I was diagnosed with what we call like a mental health issue, a mood disorder, etc. It makes me doubt myself. It's like, it's like, oh, like, is that really like a thing, or am I like, I don't know. So it's hard. I think that's a whole different conversation too, as far as like psychology, how we label people, I feel like it's true historically, like a lot of women who were very intuitive, or, we use the word witches. I don't know. They were marginalized, and they were, just had very difficult lives because of their gifts, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I definitely think that there's actually I have a girlfriend that focuses on intuitive mental therapy. And then my sister, I totally want to introduce you to. I feel like you guys would hit it off. She does a lot of subconscious reprogramming work. And what I've come to learn from observing the both of them and then just paying attention to what they do for work is that, those mental health disorders, or like that anxiety, in a lot of ways, it's almost like intuition, not properly being supported by the right structures within one's, energetic body, their physical body, their mental health, for them to be able to really apply it in the 3D and to really like almost like anchor in and, rein in that energy. But I definitely think that those that are autistic or, have anxiety, there's like definitely an intuitive component going on there.
Totally. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's the thing, is like our 3D world, matrix, etc. It's not supportive. It's simply not supportive. There's there's really not enough resources. There's a lack of understanding, right? There's like a suspicion of people who are intuitive or psychic, etc. So it's very hard. In other words, like, I get why people don't embrace it, right? I get why people hide it if they feel it. Yeah. That makes
Absolutely.
sense. Yeah. You mentioned your family and you mentioned your sisters. I would love to hear about the podcast and how that kind of came to be.
Yeah. So, thank you for asking that. I love that question. So my sister, my older sister, Nicole Christine, her and I actually have the same birthday. We're exactly 9 years apart. Isn't that wild?
That's crazy.
And it was actually her idea. And she has Sag in her big 3. And then our younger sister, she also has Sag in her big 3. And I've just noticed that those females that are in podcasting, they have some sort of like Sagittarian energy, which I think is fun. But yeah, it was just kind of like, we thought it was going to be, a mix of the light versus the dark, like the light topics that I like, and then the topics that my sister likes, which is a lot of like serial killer energy and all of that. And then it kind of just morphed into something else, and a lot of just education in the sense of, we're speaking to spirituality, spiritual topics, and it's a nice blend of the metaphysical and then the subconscious work, that there's subconscious reprogramming work that Nicole does. So she's a licensed therapist, and it's been a really beautiful blend of it. And, we're 2 years into the game, and now we're kind of just looking to see like how it wants to continue to evolve. But we love showcasing other healers and the work that's on brand for us. And I think it's a really good place to hang out and to learn if you're just coming into this work.
I love that. Yeah, it's so great. It's super cool. I think that's really fun that you do the podcast with your sisters, and that's incredible. That's wild that one of your sisters, and you have the same birthday. That's like, wow, that's so fascinating to me. Like, I've heard of, so for example, like a mom who gives birth on her birthday or something, so the mother and the child have the same birthday. That's incredible. Like it's very special. Like that's super cool.
It's so special. And then like when you look at the astrology of family astrology, you'll see that like, the parents or the daughters or child or, whatever, they're very similar signs. They're similar signs within their cosmic charts and their makeups. And I'm like, oh, like this was like a divine orchestration. You guys are soul family. So when you get really deep into the nitty gritty of that, and just like, you start paying attention to like the rabbit holes and how deep you can go, you're just like, oh, this shit is so real.
Yeah. No, I've gone deep. I feel like Alice in Wonderland. I'm like, oh my God, like what is this? I'm like emerald tablets. What is this? Like, oh my God,
like wild. And then like, you're talking about Alice in Wonderland. I was thinking of Wizard of Oz for whatever the reason. That too. Yeah. And I was like, it's almost like right in front of our face. Like if you start paying attention to just like TV shows and then like the symbolisms and like going to concerts and like how, potentially like performers are reigning in, your own energy, siphoning your energy. Like it gets wild. It doesn't stop.
It doesn't. It's so true. Like, I think like, so there are some really powerful works of art, like, The Matrix, Wizard of Oz, Harry Potter, what else? Alice in Wonderland. I'm like, oh yeah, like they're kind of giving us glimpses of what it looks like, like what, in other words, like what the journey is all about, or what it can be, right? So it's super fascinating. I think it's amazing.
I agree.
It's a trip. It really is a trip. I mean, I remember way back when, it's a little bit of a tangent, way back when, so I am a big X-Files fan. I love the X-Files.
Love it. Okay.
Right? Makes sense, right? Aquarius moon. Yeah, weird, like alien stuff. But I remember, and this really struck me, there was an episode where they mentioned something to the effect of like, our souls are always kind of connected. So in other words, like in this lifetime, you might be like brother and sister, but in a different lifetime, you might have been husband and wife, or, even gender stuff, right? So you might have been like sisters in another life. It doesn't matter. Like if you're a man and woman now, right? So things like that, I was like, whoa, like that is a trip. And I'm like, I can see that, like now I'm like, okay, like I can actually see that being possible. So so fascinating.
I think about that often with respect to just like, because I have an idea what the planets are doing, and like I know me and my older sister have a very specific contract with respect to like our most previous lifetime together, and I was like, Nicole, like you and I are just redoing this lifetime from like 80 years ago. Like we're here to finish this up, and like, and I know it's an arrogant thing to say, but like hopefully not have to come back. So
like, I love that you just said that, because I've literally thought to myself, like, I'm not coming back to this. I really have. I'm like, God, please. I'm like, please, God, like, I need my people. We got to get it together. Like, we got to get it together. We're not doing this again. It's been fun, but no, it's too much. It's too much.
I was literally like, I'm on this kick of, so we're towards the end of April at time of recording, and I've tried to do, and I will complete having done breath work every single day for the month of April. And one of these thoughts that I had as I was like in that process I was like, I came up, it was like an old memory. I was in first grade, and I remember thinking back to when I was in first grade, looking around in my class. I know exactly where I was at in the room. And I was thinking to myself, I hope if I have to come back in this next lifetime, which I don't, like, I hope I don't want to, I want this skill set and to be able to answer questions like this as quickly as I am. Like, what first grader thinks like that,
Oh
you
my gosh,
know? So,
that's
yeah,
so amazing. Oh my god. See, at first grade you knew. Oh my
I
gosh.
know.
And also, right?
Little me.
And that's the little you. Yeah, and that's the amazing thing is like there's actually one she's a great reader. Her name is Natija Cave. I don't know if you've come across her.
No, but I'll look her up.
She's great. Yeah. Um I and that's one of those things that, certain readers, they pick up on your energy, or they're reading for your
Yeah.
collective, what have you, right? But whenever I watch her readings, I find what she says like spot on. She's super good.
Yeah.
Um and she always talks about, we're the closest to God when we're like children,
Yeah.
right? So as children, we are the most receptive and most open, the most imaginative, creative, etc. Makes sense.
It
It makes
totally
sense.
makes sense. And
Yeah.
it's that before that programming sets in.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Totally. Amazing. Oh, it's super cool. I love it. Um, let's see. Yes. And so what else did I want to ask you about? Oh yeah. So speaking of childhood, I would love to hear, as far as like, if you could go back in time, like what advice would you give to your younger self? And also like what advice would you give to young Latinas today? There's so much going on. There's
Yeah.
so much like I can't, I have to say, like, I truly, like, God bless everybody who's in like elementary, middle school, high school right now. This is crazy. It's
Yeah.
crazy for the adults, right? Like
Yeah.
there's so much going on for the adults. I can't imagine being like a young person, not only trying to figure oneself out, but trying to understand like what is this mess right here? Like, oh my gosh.
Absolutely. I was thinking about, because we had talked about this question prior to,
Mhm.
and I'm like, I think I actually know how I want to answer it now, but I, I, and it's hard to say, it's challenging, I should say, to say that, because I don't think you really consider or take into effect, like who you are today is because of the journey that you've been through and the experiences that you had when you were younger. And I mean, as much as a young child could possibly know, I wish I would have been able to tell myself, like, you're right where you're supposed to be. Like, people are acting out or treating you this way because you've always been, different. And
Mm,
I think it was kind of like a little bit of sadness that I don't know that I realized, like, why things just didn't make sense or why I was just so uncomfortable as I was younger, because
mm,
I didn't have the language for it until I was, an adult.
right.
And so I wish that someone kind of would have given me that insight, and just like to say it's like okay, and it's okay to be different, and like there's a very special purpose for you. And
Yeah.
yeah, I just kind of wish I would have known that then. But
Mhm.
maybe it's because I'm so deep into my inner child work right now that that's
Mhm.
coming up, but just also knowing that it's going to be okay, and like to give yourself time. But I actually don't think I've really got comfortable with this density, and that's the hard part, right? It's like
Mm,
you want to have, like maybe a partner or a house and kids, but you have to be here on planet Earth and be grounded in order to get those things and not be elsewhere. So
mm,
like just learning that, like bridging those two dimensions would be a challenge, but you'd be okay doing it.
totally. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. It's tough because a part of me is like, part of me wishes that the adults around us had done more of their healing work. Does that make
Yeah.
sense? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And no shade, right? Like they were all, everyone was trying to survive, everyone
Yeah.
was trying to like make ends meet, etc. For example, um, but it's like, man, I just think of like if
Yeah.
I had like just a little bit more support, right? If I had just because no shade, but I'm like I've done a lot, right? I'm like with given my circumstances and things, like I feel like I've done okay. But if I had had just like a little bit more support, ooh, I can't imagine. You know what I mean? I can only imagine. So it's hard. I think sometimes that kind of inner child work can be hard. It can be very emotional and like it's bittersweet. I think sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that I also think that I mean, I definitely feel the same way, especially when the healing is just right in front of my face and super uncomfortable, and you can only move through it.
Hmm.
But I also feel like for at least our parents' generations and even prior to theirs, that the healing work was actually quite taboo. So,
Yeah,
so like it was,
absolutely.
yeah. And I think it's
Yeah.
only just now become a little bit more accepted, and now it's more of a trend. And, you see
Yeah.
people, and like I've definitely had recent experiences where, people are in it for the wrong reasons and they're here for their own attention. And it's like, it is becoming more mainstream, but I'm glad that more and more people are getting the support that they need. So those patterns will continue in the future.
1,000% right. Exactly. Like they didn't, it, the term luxury is a little bit, you know, prickly, but
Mhm.
in a way they didn't have the luxury, right? Like
Yeah.
they didn't have the time or the space. It was not allowed. Like the idea of therapy, the idea of like self-care, even talking about the things that were like hurting someone or that were like not right, that was not acceptable. It was
Mhm.
kind of like you just make the best of it, swallow your tears and keep moving, right?
Mhm.
And so it's true. Like I feel that yeah, like every generation, it's almost like every generation had their struggles, and so here we are, right? Like it's like here we are, and this is the mission that we have to an extent, right?
Absolutely.
Um it's so funny. I always think, what's that Mission Impossible? I'm like, this is your mission. Should you choose to accept it? It's like, oh no.
Well, I'm going to start adding into my readings. You have a choice. Do
Well,
you want
do
to?
you have it? Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, but
yeah.
do you have a choice? But the choice is being presented to you. Do you want to let the genie out of the bottle?
Right,
Yeah,
right.
because you
It's
can't
so
go back
funny.
in.
Like, I'm gonna like side note really quick. So in theology, right, this whole concept of like double predestination, it was always very like,
Oh my
yes,
God. Okay, please say
that's
more.
very Calvin. Yeah, it's very. I feel like that was. I'm kind of like racking my brain, going back in the archives. I want to say it was very Calvin, like sinners in the hands of an angry God, Jonathan Edwards, like that kind of stuff. This idea, like basically, like we have there we really, in that kind of theology, we really don't have any say. Like we're
Mhm.
already, it's like we're on a very fixed road. Um, and there's little that we can do to improve it. It's like, oh God, that always made me really
Mhm.
uncomfortable. It's like, that sounds terrible. Like that's awful. Like, give
Yeah.
me free will, like it's crazy.
I have this whole concept. I'm like, is free will even a thing? Like, is fate
Wow.
or free will? Like, how much
Yeah.
of it? We did a whole episode on it on our podcast. Go and check
Oh
it
my
out.
gosh.
But I feel like I
It's so
just,
fascinating.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's a
that
lot.
right, right. Like so exactly like those concepts of like how much is destiny, how much is fate, how much is already written in the stars. Like I don't know, like it's I feel like I used to have like a pretty clear, quote unquote, a pretty clear answer before, that I would say like with everything that's happened spiritually in the last couple of years to me, I'm like, "Oh no, like I thought I knew, but not at all now." Like I have no idea.
Mhm.
Um and that's okay. It's okay.
Mhm.
And I do feel firm in saying like there's probably a lot of things that we may never know in this like
Oh, totally.
incarnation, right? Or
Yeah.
this earthly plane. Like we're just not meant to know.
It's an illusion, as they say.
Yeah. 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 Oh my gosh, this was amazing.
Oh, thank
Thank you so
you.
much, Gabrielle. So do me a favor and tell the good people where they can find you, where they can book you, because I know people are going to want to get a reading. Go get a reading with her, you guys. She's fantastic.
Oh, thank you so much
Support
for
our girl.
having me. Yeah, I appreciate you. I want to link you up with my
Yeah.
sister and a couple other people.
Yeah.
I feel like it would be such a match. Yeah, so I'm Gabrielle Celeste. I'm the owner of Agua Astrology. You can find me at www.aguaastrology.com. I'm on Instagram at Agua Astrology, and the podcast is at the Spiritual Sisters Podcast. So you type that in and it'll show up on anywhere that you listen to podcasts. Yeah, you can book a reading with me through my podcast as well. I also teach on Agua Astrology Academy, which is available through the Teachable platform. And then I offer, so online on my website, the readings there are through Zoom, but I do offer Etsy readings that are written that are a little bit more accessible. And you can access that through my newsletter and through my Instagram link tree.
Perfect. Awesome. And I'll make sure to include the links and information in the show notes for this episode.
Thank
Yay!
you. Thank you so much for having me. This was so
Fabulous.
fun. And I can't wait to share with my audience as well.
Yay. I can't wait. Thank you so much, Gabrielle.
Yeah.
So, again, thank you for listening, folks. This is the Gold Hoops and God podcast. New episodes are available every Wednesday, everywhere you listen to your podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeart, and all the rest. And then a video of the interviews are available on Wednesdays on YouTube. The new videos are released on Wednesdays at 1:11 p.m. Pacific. Angel numbers. Yes. Thank you so much. Thanks for listening. Thanks for joining us. Bye.